May we learn together in hope and joy. Please be seated. I have decided, in the spirit of Christmas, to ask a question of you, and to ask of you to answer this question by the raising of hands, a very uncomfortable, awkward question. And I'm going to be especially taking a look at Father Earl. How many of you in your history with the church have sat in a service and listened to the readings and thought to yourself, gee, this is kind of boring? I see some of you, I really want to check back here. Verger, no. I saw that. I could ask how many of you found sermons boring, but I don't want to know. Just lie to me and say never, never, never. Some readings just aren't that exciting. I think that is honest to say. But other readings are action-packed. And our gospel reading today is one of those. There is a lot that happens in this one paragraph. And it has all of the elements of a suspense action thriller. You have the murderous tyrant and using the forces of the government. You have a beautiful family, Mary and Joseph. You have the beloved child. You have angels appearing. You have them fleeing in the middle of the night to Egypt. You have them coming back. You have the plot twist that it's still not safe. You have them ending up in Nazareth. And you have all of these things. And when I read that, I think to myself, that sounds like the plot to a movie. And when I say that that sounds like a plot to a movie, what I am actually revealing about myself is something important. And that is just how remarkably privileged I am. Just how remarkably privileged I am to look at a story about people who are afraid of their government, a story in which innocent people are threatened and chased, have to hide and flee from their own government because of the wild whims of the tyrant over them. And I say, how privileged I am to say that I don't ever recall a time in which my government tried to kill me. I don't recall a time in which I had to hide from the government. I have never had to worry about the knock on the door, or worse yet, the no knock on the door, and in comes the government coming for me. But we know that our neighbors live that every day. And not just our neighbors and friends who are across the world, our neighbors and friends who are down the street. This is not a political rant. It is just the facts of life in our community now. And that, friends, is awful. What a terrible thing that an innocent child needs to be afraid, and the parents giving up everything in order to keep that child safe. And in this story that Matthew, or the editors and writers of Matthew tell us, they offer some commentary on the story. And what I would really like for them to do is to offer commentary about how awful this is, and what a terrible person Herod is, and how we ought to fight against that. But that is not the commentary that Matthew offers. Instead, this gospel story, in its two commentary moments, says this is to fulfill prophecies of old. And we should take one moment to pause and reflect on the reality that just because it is a fulfillment of the prophecy of old does not mean that it's a good, right? Can we get behind that? Can we all agree? Killing, Chris, you're pro-killing child? He's not even listening. Max, pro or against murdering infants? The moral ambiguities of those on the channel. Well, we won't go there. We'll address that another time. The Feast of the Holy Innocents, which recently passed, tells of Herod murdering child after child after child. And Matthew says this is a fulfillment of prophecy, that there will be a weeping herd in Ramah. And clearly that is not a good thing. So we should not say that just because these are fulfillments of prophecy, they are good things. They are in fact bad things. But Matthew is doing something fascinating by quoting these two prophecies. And it's going to get a little nerdy, but if you stick with me, I think there might be something interesting and good on the other side. The first prophecy that is quoted is from Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. Out of Egypt I have called my son. This is in a retelling of the history of Israel. God is reminding God's people of what has happened for them. Remember when you were slaves in Egypt? And I called you out of Egypt? Moses, let my people go. The plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, leaving that terrible place and coming into, after a genocidal attempt, but we won't touch on that, a land flowing with milk and honey. The prophecy is about leaving a place of terror and coming to a place, after genocide, of peace. But that is the exact opposite of what is happening for Jesus. They fled to Egypt because Egypt was the place where they were safe from terror. And when God tells Joseph, bring your child and wife back to Israel, they are going from a place of peace and safety to a place of terror and danger. It's the exact opposite of what the prophet was saying. And I think that's interesting, but I also think it's important. And I think it's important for many reasons, but this is one of them. It is easy, I think, when today is better than yesterday, to say, thank you, Lord, for bringing me to a better day. I think it's easier when we look back and say, well, 2025, that was better than 2024. Certainly better than 2022. 2020, that's the one I was thinking of. Anyway, 22, not right either. Anyway, look it, I am going from terror to peace, from bad to good, or from good to better. That's easy. Things seem right when that happens. But if today is worse than yesterday, or 2025 was worse than 2024, or I feel more at risk today than I've ever felt before, the questions that come up in our minds can be very challenging. We might be tempted to say, what is wrong? What is wrong with me that things are worse, not better? What is wrong with God that things are worse, not better? Did I do something wrong? Am I something wrong? Did God do something wrong? Maybe God is what is wrong. I just used the word wrong 16 times. That's a record. Like that. Matthew has an answer to that. Matthew's answer to that is no. You are not wrong. What you have done is not wrong. This is exactly what I called my son Jesus to do. And if you want to know in your life or in your world where you might find the presence of Christ, where you might find the presence of God, where when these questions of, did I mess up, overwhelm your heart, you can go every single time and find the presence of God. It's the place that's a little worse than where you are now, where people are hurting a little more than you are hurting. And so when today feels worse than yesterday, we can be well assured that Jesus has traveled that journey before, that Christ is traveling that journey with you now, And wherever we land today, God's right there. And there's a similar point in the second prophecy. He will be called a Nazarene. This is what we call in biblical studies a text to be despaired of. And so it's complicated, and so I'm going to mess it up. And then you're going to have to check with Father Earl after the service. And he'll clear up all the idea. One of the challenges is that nowhere in the Hebrew Bible does it say he will be called a Nazarene. And so the prophets have said, and we look in the prophets and we don't find them, and that gets confusing. So maybe, scholars suggest, it's a prophet who just didn't make it into the canon, didn't make it into the Bible, didn't make it into the scriptures. Maybe it's some other prophet. We know there were lots of other prophets, not just the big names that we have in our scriptures. Maybe it was one of them. Maybe. Maybe we're translating the word wrong. That's my favorite. Like, oh, we got the Hebrew wrong. Maybe it's not a Nazarene, maybe it's a Nazarite. Those folks who took special vows. They were the holy folk of the day. Lots of different vows. One of them is that they wouldn't cut their hair. Do you remember the story of Samson? Samson. When does he lose his strength? When they cut his hair, because it was a vow that they took. Maybe it means that Jesus is going to be a Nazarite. Unfortunately, the gospel doesn't describe a Nazarite when they're describing Jesus, so that's probably not true. So what else could be going on? There's a third option, shockingly, the one that I buy into, and that is to look at this verse in the context of one other statement that is made about Nazareth in the Gospels by an apostle named Nathanael. When his brother says the Messiah has come to see him, it's Jesus of Nazareth, he asks the rhetorical question that would have been on the lips of everyone who heard about Jesus from Israel: can anything good come from Nazareth? That tells us a little bit about how people thought about Nazareth in that day. And I'm not sure I know a real great example in our world of where we would say those people from that place are just worse. They're morally corrupt. They're ugly. They have halitosis. They dress in ugly clothing. There's everything bad about those people. Can I make two political statements just real quick? The United States has to declare war on somebody for us to be able to decide who that is, because it's whoever we're fighting. They're the unhuman, less than human, subhuman people. And so I think what Matthew is getting at is that he will be called a person of no reputation. And if that's the idea, that's all throughout the prophets. That Jesus isn't one born on third base, isn't one with the silver spoon. Jesus is the lowest of the low, someone who was despised. And I'll tell you what, friends, I don't like that. I don't like that because that tells me I ought to be somebody who isn't seeking to be overly concerned about my reputation. And I have spent hours, friends, with my therapist and more hours with my spiritual director trying to figure out why I am so concerned about my reputation. And we have gotten preciously short on that journey. Because and I imagine some of you might be like this too, I am very concerned with how people perceive and think about me. After every semester, you get the comments from your students, and you read them anonymously. And because I'm awesome, it's like 40 comments about how amazing I am. And then there's that one comment, and you read it, and then you read it again, and you read it a third time, and you wonder, who is the snot-nosed child that wrote this? That I'm... And if you don't think I've memorized every last one of those for the last however many, every one of them's in here. Because I care about it. But Jesus, in his example, says, that's not what is important. And by the way, to connect this to the other prophecy, if you want to know where Christ is, if you want to know in whom you may see the divine when you look them in the eye, it's not the person with the dazzling, sterling reputation. It is the people who in our world are stomped upon, thrown to the side, and as best as we can, erased from our memory. Sometimes we wonder what God is up to. We wonder where God is at. We wonder, how can I get a sense? And we come to church and we hear marvelous music. And it is. But we don't find God there. And we come and we receive the Eucharist, where we're told there is the true presence of Christ, and we receive it and we sip. I hope something special was going to happen. And it didn't. But you can know with utter certainty, I can know with utter certainty, that when I pick up some gift bags and go into Lackawanna County Prison as part of the Anna Young Project, and I look at that person who has been beaten down, thrown away, been told over and over again that they are disposable, and that the pain that they are suffering is what's right and just, then I can look them in the eye, and friends, there I will always see Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.